Hey, it's Ralph and Marcus on the Good Sugar Podcast. This week, Dr. Sanguan comes on. We talk about how to say no in your life, how to know if you're on the way to being burned out, and we actually bring Marcus to tears. It's all on this episode of the Good Sugar Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Good Sugar Podcast. I'm Ralph Sutton, Marcus Antebi. Marcus, real quickly, just going to say it once and move on. I just came back from a very, I would say, spiritual thing that happened to me. It really blew my mind.
Wow.
Which was I went to Mexico just for 3 nights, and I swam with whale sharks in La Paz, which is an area in Mexico. These fucking things, the size of trucks, gentle giants just meandering through the water. It was awe-inspiring. It was a real moment for me. It was really fucking wild.
What'd you do? You snorkeled with them?
Snorkel with them. They don't let you deep dive with them anymore because they found out that it upsets them. So they're very conscious of the animal's well-being. So there's no more deep dive. You can only snorkel at the surface with them.
You know what whale sharks are thinking when humans are swimming around them?
What's that?
Man, I wish I had teeth.
There you go. Fair enough. So a couple of quick things. We're going to bring our doctor on in a moment, which I think is going to be an inspired conversation about the way you handle stress in your life. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. And how your childhood programs you, so to speak. We get into a little bit pretty deeply. I think we will. I just have one quick question for you that I found out right before we went on air. I know your mom is in town. Are you going to see your mom while she's in town?
You know, gosh, it's a sad thing. My mom came to town because her youngest sister, Denise, of course you remember Denise.
Mm-hmm.
She's not even 70, and she's got Parkinson's that caused by like 40 years of taking some type of antidepressant.
Okay.
So she's catatonic. So my mom's obviously her and her other sisters are spending every waking moment by the bedside, and our schedules are not synchronizing.
Okay. Well, do you have any thoughts of going over to the hospital with them to see you?
Well, I asked. So the problem is I really want her to see the baby, and the timing is not right. And then plus, the hospital's it's not a great place. And then my Aunt Denise doesn't want to have any visitors, so I wouldn't. It would be like a meeting in the lobby of a nasty hospital.
Funny, I remember Denise so clearly at the first Juice Press. So when I was working for you at Juice Press,
really?
I remember having conversations with her at that first Juice Press on First and First.
Wow, that's really 14 years
remember
ago.
That? Yeah, it's 14 years ago. It's pretty crazy. All right, so let's do this right now. All right, Marcus, we talked long enough. Let's bring our doctor on right now. She's an author, a coach, a speaker. She bridges science of medicine with the art of communication, and she's here to talk about her new book, Powered by Me, From Burned Out to Fully Charged at Work and in Life. You could follow her at Dr. Neha, which is Dr. Niha. Dr. Neha Sangwan. Am I saying it right, or am I screwing it up already?
Neha Sangwan.
There we go. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be with you.
First, let me ask you this before we do anything else. Your previous book was called Talk RX, and there was a podcast of the same name that you stopped about 2 years ago. Did you bail on the podcast space? What happened?
Well, really what I did was I think I grew. And so from the first book and launching, it was drneha.com, and you spell out the word doctor. And my first book was Talk RX. And now I've moved into this space where I have a team where it's called Intuitive Intelligence Inc. And now the book is Powered by Me. And actually I got the rights back from Hay House to my book, and it will be relaunched as some version of Navigating We. So how do we all navigate each other?
Okay, fair enough. So the first thing I looked at, I'm like, oh, there she goes. It's just So I'm going to give a little background from what I understand, and you can feel free to correct me along the way. Sure. But you obviously are a doctor, and you were working crazy hours for a very, very long time, years of exhaustion, insomnia, headaches, just letting it all happen. And then one day, it just kind of culminated, and that was it. It was a physical burnout, a mental burnout, hitting the quote-unquote rock bottom, which led you to the path that you are on now. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment.
And so you're at this point where you then start looking at, well, where did I go wrong? What was I not listening to? and where can I help other people who are going through this to assess their potential burnout and fix that. And also, on a side note, I also want to get into the whole thing of the power of no, which was on your Today Show talk and whatever.
Sure.
But let's just start with that. So kind of give us a guideline where people, I mean, Marcus is probably the most guilty of this out of everyone I know, where you don't even realize the cycle that you're in of constantly working and constantly putting yourself through things that maybe you shouldn't be. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Marcus, do you want any rebuttal before I start speaking about that?
Oh, well, I don't think I'm not sure if he's right or wrong. I'd have to think about it. I don't think let's delve a little bit more into the subject, and then I'll decide if I'm in that category.
So the way it usually starts is when people listen to the outside world's definition of success and they replace that with themselves. Okay. So when we come
guilty as charged, sorry.
So when we listen to things like faster is better, do more with less, success requires struggle, profit over people, money, net worth is your self-worth. When we listen to all of these messages in the world, we as human beings have an innate need to belong. Just as much as we need affection and attention and water and food and sleep, so too do we need to belong. And when we mistake what other people are saying for our own definition of success, we push through our bodies rather than partner with them. And if you are doing that, there is a limit to which you can continue that. And so what I would say is people first should understand what is burnout. There's this global epidemic, this overwhelm, mental, emotional health breakdown, anxiety, all these things that people are talking about. But what is burnout? Burnout is a triad. In the research, it's three things: physical, mental, emotional, exhaustion. Exhaustion is number one. And it's not like you're fine on Monday and you're burned out by Friday. It is something that goes on for months to years where you're adjusting, your physiology is adjusting, you're starting to drink one cup of coffee and then you're like, no, make it a double. You start to adjust to that stress. So the first part of the pillar is exhaustion. Mm-hmm. Then there's this part where you start to depersonalize. You start to, even though you need connection, you want connection, you don't have the energy anymore to invest in that connection. So you start depersonalizing and it's kind of creating distance between you and others. Oftentimes cynicism creeps in. And by cynicism, what I mean is you start hearing yourself say things like, you know what, it doesn't matter how hard I work. It's not going to make a difference anyway. And your own thoughts start to undermine you almost like an undertow in the ocean. You can't see it, but boy, you can feel it. And so the first one is exhaustion. The second one is the cynicism, which also comes with some depersonalization. And the third one is ineffectiveness. So when I walked into the hospital that day, I thought tired and heavy in my body were normal. I had been sleep deprived for a very long time. Exhaustion. I single-handedly thought I could change our healthcare system. There were moments long before that burnout where I started distancing myself from my patients, saying the guy in 636 rather than his name. Mm-hmm. Also, I started saying to myself, it doesn't actually matter what I do. This isn't going to change. There's your cynicism. And the day I walked into the nurse 5 hours into my shift, and I said, Nina, could you please give 40 milliequivalents of potassium to the gentleman in 636? And she said, Dr. Sanguan, are you okay? And it was my first indication that I might not be. And I said, yeah, why? She said, that's the fourth time in under 5 minutes you've asked me that same question, and I've answered you every time. So my level of ineffectiveness and my wake-up call to burnout was a dramatic one. Mm-hmm. And somebody outside me had to let me know that I was not functioning. So it starts with exhaustion over time, cynicism, some depersonalization, and ineffectiveness. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in a few phases. first phase is the alarm phase. It's like you're on a treadmill going too fast. Instead of adjusting to that treadmill and then gently getting off of it, many of us just stay on that treadmill and in fact start turning up the dial on the speed. And that becomes the second phase, which is chronic adaptation, where we're having the coffee, a glass of wine or a beer after work, make it 3. Just hand me a 6-pack, right? We start to need more and more of our coping mechanisms. That part of so you go from alarm phase to chronic adaptation. Then it just takes one more thing to tip us down the slippery slope of exhaustion to ineffectiveness. So the thing I really want people to know is, if you're saying to yourself, God, I wonder if I'm burned out, let me just say, you probably are.
If you're having the question, you're probably already there, right?
And the question is, what phase of burnout are you in? How early are you picking it up? Can you reverse it? And I just want to really tell everybody, I've been studying this for 20 years. I wrote a book on it. It took me 7 years. It doesn't mean I'm healed from burnout. I'm an all or none. I care about excellence. I'm one of those type A, performers. And even now, sometimes I feel exhausted and I have to say to myself, it's okay, Neha. You picked it up early. What do you need to do to shift course? So it's not like you're healed from it or not. What you need is the awareness.
Well, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. That was going to be my question. Some may not be self-aware enough to even pose the question to themselves.
That's right.
Is there other indicators that someone could assess and say, these are 5 things. 4 of them are happening for me right now. I need to take a look at this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So let me give you some of the signs that I typically see in people. Now, when I give you these physical signals, what I want you to know is the first thing you do if you have any of these physical signals is you go get a clean bill of health from your provider, your medical provider. You don't think burnout first, but it's fatigue, heart palpitations, intestinal, maybe you're having GI upset, muscle fatigue, sleeplessness, all sorts of physical symptoms that have you be irritable, defensive, reactive. Right. You're like, oh, that wasn't like me. Or it's the weekend is no longer enough time to recover. You go on your vacation and you're still tired. You're forgetting things that you don't normally forget. You're staying late when that is not you. So
you also said you had headaches and throat issues too, right? That was you.
So the way my body talks to me is my throat constricts and my stomach turns. I'd love it if both of you shared, when you get outside your comfort zone, how does your body talk to you? Because I bet you it's going to be different than me.
Yeah. Marcus, do you want to chime in on that?
Well, I'm really interested in the subject, but I want to try to just go back and follow like sort of a systematic approach, which is the first thing in this process. I feel like we're describing a self-help process for people who are highly functioning, that could actually become self-aware in the first place. And if there's negative traits or things that are not serving them, they're highly functioning to the degree that they could make adaptations and change. So I would go a step back and ask you something that I usually put into this is, how much of this behavior is the net result from childhood trauma and addiction and all these maladaptive behaviors, and now you're just really talking about more or less workaholism in its glory. Really, one of the symptoms of workaholism is severe burnout and not just myopic thinking, but like just obsessive thinking. You're living in the work zone. And so the way I'd pose a question is the solution to override the behavior patterns, if you are possible to do it, or is there work on inner child stuff and that whole drama that has to take place to make a lasting impact?
Okay, there are so many ways I could go here. And I'm going to start with, it depends on what level you would like to heal what you're going through. If you are in a space of acutely burning out and you're not able to function at the level that you need to, in that case, I want you to, I will give you a link that's in the book for people who have bought the book, but you don't have to buy the book. I'm going to give you the link. It's called intuitiveintelligenceinc.com/PBM, powered by me, PBM resources. If somebody listening is feeling out of control, doesn't understand how to even ground themselves as they're listening, that requires you to use breathing techniques to just feel your bottom on the seat, feel your feet on the ground, get yourself back in your body to regain your own ability to make choices. Okay. And that intuitiveintelligenceinc.com/PBM resources will give them videos for walking them through. How do you do soft belly breathing? How do you feel better? Here's a guided imagery, safe place. How do you just reground yourself? All right, next level.
You gotta get a new URL for that. It's gotta be something like savemyass.com. I love that. I think something along that line. I'm sure that one's taken, but I would think in this crisis, somebody remembering that URL might.
Well, I'm sure we could put it in the show notes.
We're going to give it to them. They're going to click on it. They're going to click on it. So thank you. You're exactly right. The next one is, I'm someone who's experiencing the fatigue. Oh my God, maybe it is burnout. Oh my God. But they're needing strategies to get through the week, get through the month, get over the deadline. That is going to be more about some awarenesses and some tools to help them identify, and we'll give them this as well, which is how in 15 minutes do you do a pulse check of where you are from burned out to fully charged on that spectrum? Where are you? And where do you have, the way you figure that out is where you have a net gain or a net drain of energy on a physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual level. Because everybody gets there uniquely. As unique as your fingerprint is your path to burnout. Then what you're speaking about is, what if I want to heal what's underneath all of this that got me here? I want to change the patterns. I want to rework things. I want to identify why I have an addiction. I have these coping mechanisms, these behaviors. Now, what I want you to know is the way I got through 36-hour shifts in the hospital without sleep, 2 ice cold 16-ounce Mountain Dews plus a king-size Snickers bar, and you could get me through 36 hours without sleep. Now, I'm not proud of that. It is not what I use now, but I'm kind of okay with the fact that my younger self came up with that mechanism to go against my own biology. That's the best I knew. Now, addiction. Childhood trauma. So the reason I ended up burned out, and I speak about this in the book, I was sent away when I was 3 months until I was 2 years old to live with my grandparents. When I reintegrated into my family, I started getting bullied. And I was so devastated that the way I coped with that was by becoming a people pleaser. This is the Mel Robbins, my older sister. She didn't really want me there.
Okay.
Now, if you're 3.5 years old and you've been an only child, and a 2-year-old shows up who thinks she's an only child, you probably don't want the love of your parents split with anyone. Right. And so I understand it now. Her and I have had those talks, but I didn't understand it then. And so what I did was I realized all of a sudden I better learn to scan my environment, figure out what everybody wants and give it to them so that I don't have to deal with being bullied. Now, as I grew older, that people pleasing transferred into being a healer, being an executive coach. I'm an engineer. Why? Because my dad wanted a son who was an engineer and my mom missed her calling to be a doctor. I said, nobody needs to fight. I can take care of it all and I'll make sure everybody's okay. That's the level of people pleasing. Then I become a doctor. Everybody wants something from me. Help me, help me, help me. I was like, sure. Didn't even care. I wasn't even included in the equation. So what I want you to know is absolutely the blueprint of our childhood leads us to our coping mechanisms, leads us, and we're doing the best we can. So there is no blame to go around there. Addiction, right. I don't want to talk about the addiction. The addiction is saving you from something much worse. whether it's workaholism, whether it's a pain and it's opioids or it's something else. I don't worry about the addiction. I worry about why the pain underneath. Gabor Mate and his work on trauma is phenomenal. So anybody who's wondering about addiction, trauma, grief, childhood, all of these things, please check out Gabor Mate, Gabormate. He's an MD from Canada. He has numerous podcasts, numerous books. You will get what you need there.
He's enlightened. He was a Holocaust survivor from the time he was under a year old. I've mentioned his name on this show.
Great.
He's very compassionate and outspoken. Former Zionist.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing. And so what I want you to know is it depends on where people are in the cycle of burnout and on what level they want help. Do you want crisis intervention right now? Do you need to go to the emergency toolkit I told you about? Do you want coping mechanisms to get you through, but you're not really ready to make deeper changes? Or are you someone who's saying, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm ready to make the changes. And that is what I do in my book. I give you this self-assessment, 6 videos, walk you through an interactive experience where you can figure out where you're having a net gain, net drain of energy. And then I give you the toolkit, a powerful toolkit to then change and heal whatever you discover. That's powered by me.
That's great. And also on your, which I think you kind of alluded to this in what you were just saying, on your Today Show clip, you talk about the power of saying no. It looks like you were locked into saying yes to everybody, which I think a lot of people are. And especially, by the way, I run a podcast network, and they're one of the former EPs of the network, the executive, he would say yes to everybody. And he eventually had I would say, an actual breakdown because he never delegated. He took everything to himself. He never said no. And had a breakdown one day, and just because he didn't understand that you can say no, and you could say it in a way where it's not like no, which is like go fuck yourself, But you say, hey, I don't have enough time in my day. Marcus, you used to say this term a lot. I don't know if you remember this, Marcus. You used to say to me years ago, "I don't have the bandwidth for that right now." Do you remember that or no? That was like one of your go-to expressions, and So I am, my brother's great at it. I'm not as good at it, but he gets to the point where sometimes he's saying no if he just doesn't want to do something that I feel he should do. It's like seeing family. If he's just not feeling good, he's going to say no. But sometimes our mom's 76. Maybe you should not say no just because you feel a little run down today. How much more time do we have with her? So those kind of things. But I do think that most people have that element of people pleasing embedded in them from childhood, and they just have to say yes.
So I did a whole hour with Mel Robbins on people pleasing. If anybody wants to get a whole hour on people pleasing, you can do that. There's 2 things you're bringing up here that I want to address. One is in childhood, we learn this early because when the adults around us don't approve of our emotions, go back in your room and don't come out until you have a smile on your face. Be a good girl, be a good boy. When we don't feel that approval, we have to make a decision. And it's not a decision at all for a child, but here's the decision. Do I authentically be who I am and what I'm feeling? Do I express that? Or do I stay attached to the people who give me food, nourishment, shelter?
Right.
That's not a choice when you're little. And many of us trade our authenticity for attachment. The second thing you're speaking about right now is boundaries. And do we have boundaries that are wide open? I mean, listen, the Indian culture, how many people fit in the car? As many as there are. How many people are sleeping at your house? As many as there are. There were no boundaries, right? It was all about family, and you just do anything you need to take care of family, okay? Or did you have trauma early? Sometimes people have physical abuse, sexual, and all sorts of, or they just felt isolated, whatever it is. Trauma is any time you have perceived helplessness. You can feel trauma by being the 4th child and nobody paying attention to you. So trauma doesn't have to be this big, tree falling. It can also be our needs not being met.
Right.
So anytime there's trauma, we respond to it and cope with it. Sometimes we draw such hard boundaries that not even love and connection can get in. Sometimes we have such loose boundaries that we feel like our mood changes with every room we move into because we're absorbing everything that's there. The goal, I'm a doctor, so I'm going to use a biological metaphor. Mother Nature does it so well. Every cell, you have 37.2 approximately cells in your trillion cells in your body, 37.2 trillion cells. Every one of them, right, is a double membrane. It's a semi-permeable phospholipid bilayer membrane that brings in the good stuff and keeps out the bad stuff. That's a just right boundary. You want to let in love, connection, feedback. You want to keep out criticism, abuse, etc. Right?
Right.
And so people have to find the not too rigid, not too porous, but the just right boundaries in their lives. And us interacting with each other, we learn through contrast. Oh, that was too much. Oh, well, that wasn't enough. And so every day we're experiencing and we're learning. But when you have trauma, you have this experience of protection. Your biology wants to protect you. So you're not gauging what's in front of you. You're reacting to what your body has stored from what happened before.
Oh, wow. It's a great subject. I'm working hard to become a better interviewer. And I'm interested in what you're saying. I mean, it's one of my most passionate subjects that, I write about and think about because I'm in recovery for so many years now. And, the first is thank you for sharing. And I think it's very positive. And I think that what I would say is that it's very personal what you're sharing. Even your whole program, obviously, it centers around the basket you were put in, and there's so many possibilities of different types of childhoods. I acknowledge how different it must be for the last few thousand years to take on the horrors that men have perpetrated onto women, as an example. And I just wanted to comment and say that my interpretation of trauma, it's not a standard definition, is that trauma is just a higher degree of fright. And anxiety is the vibration of fear. And what I really just think about in this whole conversation is that what people like us are trying to unravel is different approaches for a person to recognize that basically what the big problem is in humanity is that we're frightened animals and we don't know how to relax and bring ourselves back into parasympathetic brain. And as a result of that, whether we like it or not, we're distracted and we move towards dysfunctional processes. It's just the way that humans have either that's the best we could do as free will creatures, or it's just really a social pattern. It's happening because of severe abuse, light abuse, because trauma is not just the only thing. All the dysfunctions add up to something. Not learning the right way, being in a family of neurotic people or people mired with addiction and low self-esteem, and it's family legacy stuff, guys. What we're talking about dates back. It just keeps going back, and it's not for the purpose of blame, great doctor. I'm more of a reductionist. If I was a scientist, I would just say I'm just going to keep making it smaller so I can get right to the root. Because somebody can take that and maybe turn it into something more simple that people can follow. But the root cause of the problem is chronic fucking anxiety. Sorry for cursing. It doesn't make a difference how you were spelled with it, what childhood issue or what symptom, what addiction. If you can bring yourself back to the understanding of that anxiety, then we can very easily work on that. There's no question in there, because I went back to my old way of blabbermouthing. I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to start by saying, thank you for being a man in the world who acknowledges some of the patriarchy and the ways in which the world has been hard on women. That really moved me when you said that. And
every woman in my my mom and all her sisters, my sister, my wife. I mean, I don't think I've really encountered too many women that didn't have some form of sexual abuse in their past. So it's not that I'm anything special. It's just I'm looking at something that's very, very obvious. You know,
but things that are obvious are not always spoken. And I think that you have a platform and you have the courage and you have the self-trust in you to stand up and say the truth. And that is really worth something. So what I would say as well is that, yes, I think there's a disparity that's happening in our world where our minds, we are collectively using our minds to figure out how to speed up the external world that we live in. The latest is AI. But as a world, if we believe that success is dependent on faster is better, do more with less, success requires struggle, profit over people. If we believe these things and we collectively use our minds to create this in the external world without paying attention to the fact that our biologies, our own physiology, this being thrives on routine, exertion and rest. Exertion and rest. We sleep a third of our lives. This biology is not in harmony with what we are using our collective minds to create as our environment. That disparity creates anxiety. That disparity, because we want to belong. We want to be part of the tribe. We don't want to be kicked out. We want to be successful. We want to belong. And so we ourselves need to look at how us as individuals, as beings together, and as a world are creating something that is not in harmony with our own biology.
It's funny is that I was listening to Marcus, is that so much of this, it seems sometimes, excuse me, it almost seems like common sense, but it's not being exuded, if that makes any sense. So just a lot of this stuff, so you realize, yeah, of course that is something that we should be addressing, but most of us are not. And most of us, especially in big cities, are living in a state of borderline burnout for the most part. I think almost everybody. There's one other thing, Marcus, I want to ask one other question, unless you have something else on that topic.
No, I would say that, you know, what we have to understand here with compassion is that this extends beyond intelligence. You can have a 600 IQ and not understand any of this stuff. You know, first thing is you have to be exposed to it for a long time so that the information can sort of, you know, crystallize in your mind, right? Yeah. This even goes beyond what you're a doctor for, right? You're internal medicine. And so, you know, now you're in physics and you're into psychology and human history and biology. It's a very, very broad subject. You know, the ancient philosophers of all the great times wrote about this stuff. But they were very limited by words, by very, very basic words. That's why a lot of that stuff comes out as poetry. Today, over the centuries, we're analyzing this stuff really clearly. And if you're a person that believes in cause and effect, which if you're into science, you should be, right? That's one of the underlying principles of the universe is cause and effect. Then it has to work the same way for our personalities. The way I move my hand, the way I walk, the music I like, there has to be a cause to each thing. And understanding all the causes doesn't mean you're going to be able to unravel everything. There's millions and millions of minutes that you're alive. But you could really do is pick the really vile shit, the stuff that's character defects, the stuff that prevents you from feeling alive and happy. You could pick on those things and grab the really bad ones of that and say, okay, how do I stop that? And it takes a lot of effort because addiction is like Novocaine. We don't see it, right? Because we get caught up in the obsessive behavior. And also we're distracted, we're going really fast, and we have very profound denial mechanisms. One of the ways that we survive all the stuff that we're carrying is by just saying it's not true. It never happened. And, you know, so that's also something that has to be broken through.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying because it is true that there's some paradoxes that we need to embrace. One of them is sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up. And the other piece of this is that one of the ways that I see things differently, people sometimes ask me, like, how do you see all this? And I say, well, I'm a mechanical and biomedical engineer. I'm an internal medicine physician. I'm an executive coach. I'm a mindfulness teacher. So I approach problems with the practicality of an engineer, the scientist, that's a doctor and an engineer. But I can connect our physical health to our mental, emotional, social, and spiritual worlds through executive coaching. So I sit at the intersection of disciplines that people don't even think go together.
By the way, that was a quote that I thought Marcus kind of alluded to, and you just kind of elaborated on, which is when you said the science of medicine to help people versus the art of medicine that helps you transform from a physician to a healer. And that's an interesting dynamic that I think is often overlooked because most doctors or scientists or surgeons, whatever, they're looking through the world very myopically. If that's fully a word.
Through physical only. Physical
and
only.
not factoring in other things. And even though the word healer, I feel, has a little bit of a negative connotation to it, I do get what that is supposed to be connoting.
Yeah, like to me, a healer is when I'm talking to someone, maybe they've had a heart attack, a stroke, maybe they're worried they might have a lump or whatever it is, that I don't just answer them on a clinical, physical level, but that I actually care about the fear underlying that I also tend to the human being in front of me, that I care not just about the physical answer of what can be done, but also the emotional impact that comes from being afraid that your life might have just gotten cut short. And so to me, we need to move. Our world is so complicated now that short-term next quarter's earnings is the Band-Aid, and it's not enough. Now we need to expand to triple vision, where we're thinking about complex ideas as a me, we world. So how am I drinking Mountain Dew and eating Snickers bars to get through this day? How is hospital environment contributing to this? And what is the healthcare system's role in the rules and policies and staffing, understaffing us to keep budget? So there's always a me, we world aspect to complicated situations, just like in Burnout. I said, do you want acute? Do you want the acute answer for this moment? There's now short-term, long-term, and there's me, we world. And if you put that grid into a 9-box grid, and you can actually say to yourself, me, us, world, and me, we world, and now short-term, long-term, if you can fill out all those boxes and look at those nine aspects, you can start to make decisions that serve you now and will heal you in the future.
But, it's also something that you just kind of mentioned is that, when something is wrong, sometimes it may not just be the physical manifestation might be because of a mental, like, there's such a stupid thing that made me think of it when you were saying that. There was this TikTok video that went viral. It was an older white woman that came to complain to a big black dude about the lights that he was putting on in his front yard and how it was distracting. And she was very much almost yelling at him, right?
Yeah.
And he says to her, listen, I know that you lost your husband a couple of years ago. And I know you've been lonely. You don't need to come here and yell at me. You could just come by and hang out. We can grab it. And she gets super emotional and turns on a dime and then was like so thankful. And then they became friends. And so it's just a great example of where the problem may be completely unrelated to what you think it is if you're not looking at the big picture.
So let me just explain this really quickly in a model. Okay. So I want you to imagine each one of us is a unique skyscraper. Okay. Different shapes, different sizes.
By the way, especially me, I'm 6'6". So yes, I am.
Okay. So I'm 5'9". And we look different. Different heights, all of this. Okay. I want you to imagine that the top floor, it's your physical. Okay. And it outlines the whole body because that's the data gathering machine. Now, many people have a penthouse here. You get in, you go in the elevator, you come out on the thoughts floor. most people actually definitely have a penthouse here. They've been thinking and overthinking, and they spend a lot of time here. Okay. You get in, you go down, and you open at the heart floor. When this elevator opens, there's like no floorboards. There's danger signs. Don't go here. And anytime people start feeling discomfort, disappointment, upset, whatever it is, they run up the fire escape and they try to think their way out of it. But if there is a fire raging on this floor, I don't care how much water you're pouring on this floor and how much energy and effort you're putting here, it doesn't heal what's happening down here. Mm-hmm. And so people understanding that their emotions, this woman that you're speaking about, her unhealed, unresolved grief or emotions were showing up onto someone else. And what he understood was he knew where he ended and she began. And he said, oh, that thing's not about me. I'd be happy to make your world more comfortable. It sounds like you have something raging on this floor, okay, that you are trying to put on me. And he, with kindness, showed her how she could have done it. And I think that is really powerful when people don't really just tell you what it is or lecture you, but they give you what it is that they wish you would give them. That's powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
That guy must have been enlightened.
He must have been. Yeah, it's funny. When I first started the video, I thought, oh, this is not going to end well. And it really was it was a very touching video.
I think I'm going to say something. I'm trying to be humorous. It might not come off that way. That I'm very proud. I feel like you've come full circle and you've brought a beautiful your upbringing. If I'm not miscategorizing it, are you Hindu? Is it?
Yeah, I was raised with Hindu.
So I hear so obviously I hear a lot of the Hindu faith has very beautiful philosophy in it, and it's very welcoming and certainly intelligent, and I think that it's great in the modern time how what you're describing. If this was thousands of years ago, you would have had a seat on the council with everybody who was writing those books. Provided that you had the same insight. Well, because what it is that you said when you said that you're a doctor and you're you went engineer and you went through that list, I was asking myself, do you really believe that? Are you really those things? I'm actually literally asking, because I want to understand the highest wavelength that you do your healing work. Do you really believe those things, that you are those things?
I believe that those are experiences that I've chosen that shape how I think and have given me skill sets to look at problems, solve problems from certain angles. That's more information. If you really ask me what I think I am, I think of myself as a bridge. I'm a bridge between our physical and mental, emotional, social health. I'm a bridge between our physical world and our spiritual world. I'm a bridge between leaders and their teams. Families that are broken apart in relationships, I have the ability to connect to them. I'm a bridge between communication and our physical health. So if you ask me really those are more ways in the physical world that we relate to how somebody's trained. Mm-hmm. But if you ask me, I stopped going to any Hindu training. Like my parents sent me when I was little, and I probably stopped going at around 12 years old. I don't even think of myself really as religious. I think of myself more as spiritual. And when people remind me that I'm Hindu, it kind of surprises me. Like when you just said it, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like you're right that was
I'm psychic.
And it's true that it was part of the blueprint of my life. And I don't think when we're young, we realize how much of an impact it has on us. But a lot of people say, oh, I don't let lying dogs lie. I don't want to deal with my childhood, or I don't want to look at those things, like let them be gone. Except they're not gone. They're integrated into you. And the body, that book, Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps Score. It does.
For sure.
And anything we try to shove under the rug or we forget, shows up, and it has influenced us.
For sure.
And so you're right that I am not my training. I am not those things. But I do find in our world today, people want shortcuts to figure out whether they trust someone or they don't. And sometimes the credibility around, have you been trained in science? If so, how?
Hey, it's a great force multiplier. If I had 6 PhDs here, I'd have $100 million just from talking about this stuff. But most of the world really needs that. Ralph, one of the thing on the show that's really interesting about Ralph is we were talking about meditation for years, and until he had 9 PhD people come on and go, meditation. Now he does. Now he meditates. So, I just don't think any of that's necessary. I just think for me, it's how well you can explain the subject.
You bet.
And,
well, let me tell you, it comes from trauma. Okay. So when I was
what comes from trauma?
So when I was a little girl, and I was 5 years old.
Okay.
I wanted the love of my older sister so badly that one day she said to me, when we come home from school, I'm in first grade and you're in kindergarten. I want to be the teacher. So you're going to sit down and hold your pencil properly. Do this right. And I was like, okay, because I wanted to spend time with her. I wanted her to like me. So I became a very good student. It did not take long for me in kindergarten to know addition, subtraction, all the things that were only privy to a first grader. I suddenly was bored in school. So I'm starting to say to people during test time, oh, no, it's not that. When you add, use your fingers. This is how it works. And I'm like cheating in test time, but by helping other people. Okay. I'm second grade and a letter comes home and it is, Dear Mr. and Mrs. Sangwan, your daughter Neha has been selected for the academically gifted program in third grade. We'll be shipping her to a new school. We think that she has gifted abilities. I am so excited that I run to tell my sister about this, except I overhear her crying in my mom's lap saying, I hate Neha. I hate her. Everybody's going to think that she's smarter than I am. And that isn't true. And my mom says, because a mother's trying to soothe a child, Neha never would have gotten selected for the academically gifted program if you didn't teach her everything she knows. And I'm like, oh, so I didn't do this? It's not me. It's Ritu. So I actually don't belong here. And it wasn't until my late 30s that when I was in a self-awareness workshop, someone said to me, tell me why you have built a Fort Knox of mechanical and biomedical engineer, internal medicine physician, board certified, executive, how many more degrees do you need to believe that you are smart?
Right. Isn't that's also referred to sometimes as imposter syndrome, correct?
Yeah. And when you understand that it's serving a purpose, that little girl I didn't consciously realize this until that day when I was in my late 30s, that I had built Fort Knox around me so that no one would ever doubt that I earned this.
Right.
You're the first person I ever cried for on this show.
You never cried for me, Marcus? You never cried for me?
No, you're an asshole.
That hurts my feelings.
I'm just kidding. You're a great guy. You don't need anybody to cry for you. I wasn't really like that. I was having a very deep sense of empathy. I was imagining my 3-year-old daughter and her innocence, or that I was able to see my sister and at age 5 and think about how important that is to your personal psyche, that in your innocence you wanted the love, the approval, the validation of someone who was the master because they were older and bigger. And what I was going to say is that it's obvious that you have your doctorates and stuff like that. Okay, thank you. And those things are really important. We all have our nonsense. I have my little thing. Ralph has his. We all like to latch on to stuff. But in the truth, really, what you are is you are pure consciousness. You are me and I am you. And we're just trying to paddle the same rowboat. Maybe that's just the neurosis of actually being in the human body.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's more interesting. I think your background is more interesting to me if you were my coach. I wouldn't talk about medical stuff or scientific shit because I could go pretty deep with that stuff too. It's more interesting to me is what your childhood was like so that I can understand how you've decided to pattern your mind. And then I wouldn't copy that. It's not necessary for me. What I would do is I would just say, okay, I had a role model that fixed something that was broken in her mind. Let me try to do the math for myself. What bad track am I on? And there's so many masters to learn from on how to do that.
Yeah, 100%. I think different things are different aspects are important to different people based on what their life taught them, the people around them that they admired, valued. And when I want to just say to you, I just spent a week in India at Gandhi's ashram and learning, and it was in a Lead Like Gandhi week-long workshop, like a deep dive. And when I came out, this pure consciousness piece, they asked me, just tell us what your purpose is. And this is what I said. I said, every interaction, experience, and relationship is an opportunity for us to learn, grow, heal, and unite. And if we trust ourselves and we trust each other enough to let our souls do the dance with one another, to learn our life lessons together, we can evolve as one world family. Serving as a catalyst to make that happen is the purpose of my life.
Wow.
I have no idea where it came from, but my God, it came from something much bigger than me.
It's because you're nuts.
Well, Marcus, we do have to wrap with her. We don't want to
don't try to overthink why we're like that. You know, I mean, if you think about it, you really only have two choices. You could take a right and become a crazy person and sabotage the world. Or you take a left and the path starts off, you know, motherhood and being a good citizen. And then, you know, as you let yourself grow and evolve, it really all does actually have to just center around giving back. Otherwise, what else is there to do here except pick on your pimples and complain about people?
That's my favorite pastime. Marcus, the new book is called Powered by Me, From Burned Out to Fully Charged at Work and in Life. You can follow the doctor at Dr. Niha on Instagram, or Neha Sangwan.com is the website. And we'll have the link that you mentioned earlier in the show notes. So if you want to download that information, Brian, our producer, will put the link in. Is there anything else you want to plug before we go around the room and do the plugs for the rest of the show?
I just say that TalkRx is a book about leaning into healthy conflict. So if you know you're someone who avoids that and that feels hard for you, that's on Audible. And intuitiveintelligenceinc.com is the website for my corporate work. And lastly, I will be live for 5 days doing an immersion at Omega Institute. Wow. June 9th to the 14th, if anybody wants to do a 5-day deep dive version of what we just did.
Wow, that's awesome. Marcus, my other podcast is called The SDR Show. We're live every Wednesday and every Saturday night. Goodsugar is on the corner of 3rd Avenue and 69th Street, the store. Go down, have a vegan meal. There are no single-use plastics. And by the way, Marcus, today, my brother was raving to me about how much he loved the chocolate chip cookie. He was saying that he's dreaming about it. He had it 2 months ago, and he's still thinking about it.
That's because we put some opium in it.
Opium, that's how we do it.
We're a great front.
And also, by the way, the race that we're all doing together, which is in June, we're all doing a Spartan race together.
I thought it was April.
It's wrong. It was June. We were wrong.
Good. You have more time to get.
We have more time to get ready. If you join us, you waive the $200 fee. As long as you're coming in with Goodsugar, you get to do it for free. And if you want to, just DM me. I think we got about 30, 40 people already. I'd like to get to about 100 people before the race starts. And Doctor, thank you so much. And we'll see everybody next time on the Good Sugar Podcast.